Klobuchar of Minnesota.
Senator Klobuchar, thank you so much for being with us. It's our understanding that the Senate is on Amendment 16 of 29 amendments. Where does it all stand at this hour? And we had the health care numbers for the nation. What does it mean for Minnesotans, this bill?
It's a nightmare like every other state. 1 out of 2 people in my state is on Medicaid if they're in assisted living. So think about that. So they are literally giving tax cuts to the wealthiest, $400,000 tax cut to multimillionaires on the backs of people in assisted living, kids who are getting kicked off of food assistance, and it is, as just pointed out correctly, over $4 trillion in debt, which is going to mean increased mortgage rates. It's going to mean harder to buy a car, all of those things. And I just continue to be shocked that our Republican colleagues are lockstep with them. Every so often, if you ask me what's happened on these amendments, we have put them on the record. They say Medicaid cuts are immoral. They could have fixed it. They could have fixed it, Simone, with 1 vote. They didn't do it. They could have fixed the rural hospital problem. Just 2 of them voted with us. We just can't get the magic number of 4, and that is on them because they're afraid of Donald Trump. His threatening of a primary against Tom Tillis in North Carolina, and maybe this is the first time the 3 of you have gathered since then, I'm not sure. But what I know is that, literally now, major opening for us in North Carolina because Tom Tillis had the audacity to tell the truth about the Medicaid votes and to vote the right way.
Senator, that truth is very hard to come by from your Republican colleagues. In fact, as you noted, regarding Minnesotans as well as their fellow Americans around the country, low-income Americans lose health coverage and government food assistance on an unprecedented scale. In this bill. But to hear the president talk about it and his fellow Republican lawmakers, they describe the bill as it nears a vote in the Senate as, something that's going to be remarkable. In fact, how the GOP bill saves money. Paperwork. New York Times reporting instead of explicitly reducing benefits, Republicans would make them harder to get and to keep by including dozens of changes to dates, deadlines, document requirements, and rules. Republicans have turned paperwork into one of the bill's crucial policymaking tools, yielding hundreds of billions of dollars in savings to help offset their signature tax cuts. Translation, Senator, is that what the Republicans are doing is we're going to make it harder for you to get the services that we leave intact or in place, all right? Than they otherwise would be. Talk a little bit about the math there, if you will, given this approach.
Exactly, Michael, and I think you know this approach. It's not real. If they want to truly reform some of these programs, I think you'd see a lot of support for doing that. We don't like the status quo, but instead what they're doing is it's a mockery. They're putting in place all of these requirements because they know, based on what's happened in a few other states that have tried it, all it meant was that people couldn't access health care services and they ended up in the emergency room. In the case of the SNAP cuts, the food assistance, that's the biggest cost shift of all. $64 billion, wait a minute, to state governments, 44 of which have balanced budget requirements. So those states are either going to have hungry people or veterans, seniors off of food assistance, when instead they're going to have to maybe not fund law enforcement or something else. That's the game that's being played. It is actually $4 trillion added to the debt. And while both parties have responsibility for that debt from the past, I figure when you're at a time of some stability, which this president inherited, you should actually work on the debt. And instead, they put in all these major tax cuts that are going to make it so much worse.
Senator, help me understand something that happened during Vote-A-Rama. There was an amendment on protecting rural hospitals from Medicaid cuts, and you actually had Collins and Murkowski joining with Democrats. How can they support that amendment, but then still support this legislation without that amendment?
Now, first of all, I'm not sure what they're going to do in the end on this legislation. We're clearly listening to what they're saying, and Collins has put out kind of, say she still has issues with the bill, but then maybe she gets some amendment vote. Rural hospitals, this is going to be the first, basically, roadkill of this bill, because they're already hanging on such thin margins because of the $1 trillion in Medicaid cuts. But wait a minute. The debt is so huge in this bill that it triggers automatic $500 billion in Medicare cuts directly aimed at the hospitals. And so that's why when Tom Tillis spoke last night, I was on the floor. He gave 2 speeches, one in a bolo tie and one in a suit. I don't know, he changed clothes. But in the bolo on the polo, that's what he was wearing, he gave a speech about Medicaid, and he talked about how he had met with the Hospital Association, that he had talked to governors, his own governor, who happens to be a Democrat, that he had figured out what this really meant and how many North Carolinians would be thrown off of their health care. And he felt that that was his job as a senator. And the second speech, by the way, was on the energy mess, in which they've taken the most affordable energy, the easiest stuff to scale up that we need right now, which is wind and solar, and they've basically penalized those forms of energy. And he took that on, that's when he was wearing the suit, in a really big way, and he called the ideas half-baked and the product of philosophers and think tanks. And he did not mean left-wing ones. He meant right-wing ones. And that they didn't know the business, they didn't know what they were doing. And that is on top of what Elon Musk said, right, where Elon Musk basically has said that he thought that it was utterly insane and destructive. You always want to quote Elon Musk directly, so I don't want to get it wrong. And that their energy policy would destroy millions of jobs, says on X, and cause immense strategic harm to America. So you've got some pretty conservative voices out there speaking out on energy, which haven't been enough of the subject. But think of it this way. We want affordable energy. And nonpartisan groups have said this adds at least $400 a year in electricity bills for Americans.
Michael made this point on our show call earlier today. We're going to talk more about energy throughout the week, folks, so stay tuned. Michael still has you all covered. Can I note, on Friday, maybe it was Saturday morning, but I got an email from a person from my home state in Nebraska, and these they're with a group called Common Ground, and they're organizing so people know about this bill. And they were actually shocked because in western Nebraska, which is much like many places in your state of Minnesota and many places across this country, it's rural. Many people actually had not heard about the impacts of this bill. When they were talking about this at these town halls that were organized, the folks in places like Scottsbluff, Nebraska, from the Economic Development Office, could not believe what these folks from Common Ground were saying were going to happen in this bill. And as they were Googling it, literally live while this town hall was happening, they were stunned. And it struck me, Senator, that there are, while a lot of people are aware, and I think because Democrats have done a good job of making the case on Medicaid specifically about what is in this bill, there are still many people across this country that are probably unaware of the devastating impacts. I say that to say, unlike the affordable health care fight, when John McCain went and voted his conscience and made sure that Americans could retain the health care that they had all come to know and love, I wonder if there are as many Republicans that are needed to do the John McCain, if you will, because so many of their constituents, many of them aren't aware of the devastating impacts. And some of these senators are going to be able to skate by the skin of their teeth and a little bit of their hiney and get through on this bill. I mean, what are Democrats saying to your colleagues?
So I think in the end, they're not going to be able to skate by because the people that do know about it, it's 2-to-1 against. And I'm just quoting a Fox News poll for you. I know it's a competitor, but I can't resist. So that is 60% of people that don't like this bill. And it's 2-to-1 that they think it's going to help the wealthy, and they're right, and not families like theirs. So that's the first thing you need to know. For the people that don't know about it, and there are a significant number, it's on all of us. That is why we have been out there every which way we can as Democrats to push out what it means. And I can tell you right now, they're going to see the effects of this much sooner than you think if it passes. And there are still a whole bunch of Republicans in the Senate we still don't know. We're going to fight this out till the wee hours of the morning with this. We still don't know what they're going to do. But then you've got the House, which has been severely divided on versions of this bill. So I think it is on all of us to make the case. I'll tell you on the Affordable Care Act, remember how long that debate went on? It went on for years, and the John McCain vote was years after it was in law, right? So sometimes these things take time, but when I look at how Democrats have been organizing, that we had, think of those last rallies, the No Kings rallies, the hundreds of thousands of people out across the country. When I think about how the Democratic AGs have been taking on these cases, when I look at the Supreme Court race in Wisconsin and how Donald Trump right now is at 37%, in many, many polls, including the Fox News one, when it comes to his handling of the economy. If we didn't have a strong economic message and a strong resistance going right now, that wouldn't be the case. And so I'm just thinking we're going to build on this, and this bill is a disaster. It is a big, beautiful betrayal of the American people. And if we can just say that every day, 100 times online and on your shows, it's going to sink through, and that's what we plan to do for the rest of the year.
Senator, just real quick on that point, because I think it's a very important one about how this message lands with the American people. What happens next? You're going through, as we started the conversation, 16 of 29 amendments. You'll go through this process. Then what? What should the American people be looking for and watching for over the next 24 hours or however many hours are left in the floor vote?
Sure. So the first thing is to continue to call members of the U.S. Senate Republicans. Democrats are uniformly opposed to this bill. Let us make that clear. So they just have to keep calling. And I don't care who they're calling, because you've had people like Josh Hawley say that the Medicaid cuts were immoral. Now it seems as though he may vote for this bill. But I think people just need to keep calling people, and they need to keep emailing and make their views clear. And that's the same by showing up and demanding town halls and the like when they get back. Then the House. So then if it passes tonight, and we still have no idea if they have the votes, we're going to be duking this out. We required a reading of the bill, all 940 pages, because we figured they hadn't read it. And we have done all we can procedurally. But now it's going to turn, if they do somehow pass it and 4 will not stand up and they're afraid of the president, they rubber stamp everything he does, then it goes over to the House that had a different bill on many fronts. This bill actually is worse on the debt, right? The Senate bill is worse on the debt. Let me say that again. And you know there's some people over there in the House that are concerned about that. The Senate bill has all kinds of issues in terms of energy and what it's done for a bunch of projects in people's district and Medicaid funding. So then it goes over to the House, and they got to decide what they're going to do. I don't know if they're coming back this week. So there is going to be a continued fight that switches over to the House, and we're just going to fight it. We just had people on the steps of the Capitol yesterday with about 10 senators talking about what it means for families of people with disabilities, faith leaders turning out. And so we're going to fight this to the very end. And then, of course, regardless of what happens with this bill, we just keep taking it toward the elections. You've got elections just this fall with Virginia and New Jersey governor's races and state elections. That is our goal, because when you look at the numbers and you look at how we've done in these races so far, Democrats are on the move. We are united on this economic message, and I believe it's going to flip these houses, both of them, when we get to the midterms. Why? Because rural is getting hit the most, and that is an argument that we have to make every single day. The tariffs, the Medicaid and Medicare cuts, and then, of course, these rural hospitals. It's hitting them every which way. And that is not why they voted for Donald Trump.
All right, Senator.